The day I came home early was supposed to be a happy surprise, but it became the beginning of a truth that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. I had spent nearly 8 months in Britain overseeing a consulting project for an engineering firm. The assignment was supposed to last until November, but the work finished ahead of schedule. Instead of calling anyone, I decided to fly back to Texas 3 weeks early. I imagined the look on my daughter Emily's face when she saw me standing at her front door. She had always loved surprises. Even as a little girl, she would run across the room and throw her arms around me whenever I returned from a business trip. During the 10-hour flight home, I thought about those memories. I thought about family dinners, birthday parties, and all the ordinary moments that become precious as the years pass. At 68 years old, I had learned that time was the one thing nobody could earn back. When my rental car turned into Emily's neighborhood that Thursday afternoon, something felt different immediately. The street seemed unusually quiet. No children riding bicycles. No neighbors mowing lawns. No music drifting from open windows. The silence was not frightening. It was simply strange. Emily's house appeared exactly as I remembered it. Fresh paint, trimmed hedges, flower pots beside the porch. Everything looked perfect. I parked at the curb, stepped out, and smiled. Then I noticed that the garage door was partially open. Only a few inches. Just enough to catch my attention. Emily was normally careful about details. She double-checked locks. She organized everything. A half-open garage door did not fit her habits. I carried my suitcase halfway up the driveway before stopping. For reasons I still cannot explain, I changed direction and walked toward the garage instead of the front door. The afternoon heat lingered in the air as I approached. I reached down and lifted the door the rest of the way. At first, I could not understand what I was seeing. The space was clean and organized. Shelves lined the walls. Storage bins sat neatly stacked. But near the back of the garage stood a folding cot covered with a blanket. Beside it sat a portable fan and several bottles of water. And lying there was Emily. My daughter slowly opened her eyes and looked at me as if she could not believe I was standing there. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I felt relief when I realized she was conscious and able to respond, but that relief quickly gave way to confusion. Why was she here? Why was she resting in a garage instead of inside her own home? I called her name and moved closer. She managed. That night, after Emily finally went inside the house, I sat alone in the garage for a long time. The folding cot remained exactly where I had found it. The portable fan hummed softly beside it. A thin blanket had been folded with careful precision. Nothing looked temporary. Nothing looked accidental. Someone had arranged this space to be lived in. I ran my hand across the edge of the cot and tried to understand what I was seeing. During my years in Britain, I had told myself that the distance between Emily and me was simply part of adulthood. People got busy. Lives changed. Families grew apart and then came back together. That was what I believed. Looking back, the signs had been there all along. The phone calls became shorter. The stories disappeared. The laughter that once filled every conversation slowly faded. At first, I blamed the time difference. Then I blamed work. Eventually, I stopped asking questions because every answer sounded the same. Everything is fine, Dad. Do not worry about me. I remembered one call from almost a year earlier. I had been standing outside a hotel in Manchester after a long meeting. Emily answered on the second ring. Her voice sounded distant. I asked if she was happy. There had been a pause before she answered. Not a long pause, just long enough for me to notice. Then she laughed softly and changed the subject. At the time, I accepted it. Now I wished I had not. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Years of travel had made early mornings a habit I could never break. The house was silent. I made coffee and stood by the kitchen window watching the sky brighten above the neighborhood. Everything looked peaceful, yet I could not shake the feeling that I had walked into the middle of a story already in progress. Emily came downstairs about 30 minutes later. She looked exhausted despite having slept most of the previous afternoon. There was a fragility about her that I did not remember. Not weakness. More like someone carrying a weight nobody else could see. She smiled when she saw me. "You are up early," she said. "Old habits," I replied. For a few minutes we sat together at the kitchen table. The silence between us felt different from the night before. Less guarded. More uncertain. I wanted to ask about the garage. I wanted to ask why she looked afraid every time she glanced toward the front door. Instead, I asked about her teaching job. Her eyes brightened briefly. She spoke about her students. Their projects. Their field trips. The conversation felt normal. Then something changed. Her phone buzzed on the table. She looked at the screen and immediately became quiet. The light disappeared from her expression. She placed the phone face down without opening the message. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just a reminder," she said quickly. The answer came too fast. Before I could respond, she stood up and carried her coffee mug to the sink. The walls were back up again. Later that morning, I walked through the house while Emily rested upstairs. Family photographs covered the hallway. Birthdays, graduations, Thanksgiving dinners. I stopped in front of a picture taken 2 summers earlier. Emily was smiling beside Ryan at a lake outside Austin. On the surface, it looked like a happy memory. But the longer I studied it, the more something bothered me. It was not Ryan. It was Emily. Her smile looked exactly like the one she had given me in the garage. Polite, careful, controlled. And for the first time, I began to wonder whether my daughter had been trying to tell me something for much longer than I had realized. Ryan arrived home shortly before sunset, carrying 2 paper bags from a local restaurant. From the outside, he looked like a thoughtful husband bringing dinner home after a long day. If I had met him for the first time that evening, I probably would have liked him. That was what made everything so difficult. Nothing about him appeared suspicious. He greeted me warmly, asked about my trip, and even apologized for not being there when I arrived. Yet the more I watched him, the more uneasy I became. During dinner, I noticed something that stayed with me. Every time I asked Emily a question, Ryan answered first. Not rudely, not aggressively, smoothly, naturally, as if he had been doing it for years. When I asked how school was going, Ryan explained how busy she had been. When I asked whether she still met with her friends from college, Ryan explained that everyone had moved away. When I asked about holiday plans, Ryan already had the answer prepared. Emily sat quietly beside him, occasionally nodding, occasionally forcing a smile. I began paying closer attention. Several times, she opened her mouth as though she wanted to say something, only to stop when Ryan continued talking. Most people would not have noticed it. A father notices. After dinner, Ryan offered to help me carry my luggage upstairs. We walked together through the hallway. Family photographs covered the walls. Vacations, anniversaries, barbecues, smiling faces. Ryan stopped beside one picture taken at a lake outside Austin. "That was one of our favorite weekends," he said. I looked at the photograph. Emily was smiling. Ryan was smiling. Everyone looked happy. Yet something about the image felt wrong. The smile Emily wore in that picture was identical to the one she had given me in the garage. Careful, controlled, measured. Ryan continued speaking about the trip, but I barely heard him. Later that evening, Emily excused herself and went upstairs. Ryan and I remained in the living room watching a baseball game neither of us seemed interested in. The television filled the silence. Then Ryan muted it unexpectedly. "I am glad you are here," he said. His tone sounded sincere. "Emily has been going through a difficult period." I waited. What kind of difficult period? He leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Stress, anxiety, burnout. You know how demanding teaching can be." His answer arrived too quickly, too polished, almost rehearsed. "Is that why she is sleeping in the garage?" I asked. The question hung in the air. Ryan smiled faintly. "It sounds strange when you say it like that." I did not smile back. For the first time, he seemed uncomfortable. "Sometimes she wants space," he explained. "The garage is quiet." Quiet. The word echoed in my head. A garage was not a retreat. It was where people stored tools and holiday decorations. Nothing about this explanation felt reasonable. Yet Ryan delivered it with complete confidence. That confidence bothered me more than the explanation itself. Around 10 o'clock, we headed upstairs. My guest room sat across the hall from Emily and Ryan's bedroom. Before closing my door, I glanced down the hallway. Emily stood alone near the window at the far end. Moonlight spilled across the floorboards around her. She looked smaller than I remembered, tired, lost in thought. When she noticed me watching, she managed a faint smile. Then she quietly returned to her room. I lay awake for hours that night. Something about the entire day refused to settle in my mind. The garage, the rehearsed answers, the photographs, the silence. Eventually I got out of bed and checked my phone. No new messages, no missed calls. Then I noticed something unexpected. Earlier that afternoon, while unpacking, I had searched through old conversations with Emily. Looking at them now, I realized there was a gap. Nearly 3 months of messages were missing completely. Not unanswered. missing, as though they had never existed at all. The next morning, I could not stop thinking about the missing messages. 3 months of conversations had simply vanished. Not unanswered, not forgotten, gone. I sat at the kitchen table long before anyone else woke up, scrolling through old emails and message histories on my phone. The gaps were impossible to ignore once I noticed them. Certain dates appeared again and again. Long stretches where there should have been conversations contained nothing at all. I remembered sending Emily photographs from Britain. Pictures of old stone bridges, narrow streets, and cafes near my hotel. I remembered asking about her birthday plans. I remembered checking my phone every evening and wondering why she seemed so distant. Yet now it looked as though entire exchanges had disappeared. Around 7 o'clock, Emily came downstairs. She looked surprised to find me awake. "Could not sleep?" she asked softly. "Jet lag," I replied. It was easier than telling her the truth. She poured herself coffee and sat across from me. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then she looked out the window and said something unexpected. "Do you ever feel like time disappears?" I looked at her carefully. "What do you mean?" She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "You think you remember things clearly. Then one day you look back and realize pieces are missing." My heart skipped a beat. The comment felt too specific to be random. "Sometimes," I answered. "Usually there is a reason." Emily nodded slowly. Before she could say anything else, footsteps echoed from upstairs. Ryan appeared a few seconds later. The moment he entered the kitchen, the conversation ended. Emily became quiet again. Ryan smiled and greeted both of us as though everything in the world was perfectly normal. After breakfast, he left for work. At least, that was what he said. Once his truck disappeared down the street, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. Fresh air often helped me organize my thoughts. About halfway down the block, I noticed an older woman trimming flowers near her front porch. She smiled politely when she saw me. "You are Emily's father, aren't you?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. "I am." She introduced herself as Linda Hayes. Her home sat directly across the street from Emily's house. We exchanged a few friendly words about the neighborhood. Then her expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. "I was glad to see your car yesterday," she said. "Emily has needed family around." The statement lingered in the air between us. "Has she?" I asked carefully. Linda hesitated. "I should probably mind my own business. Sometimes neighbors see things family members miss." She looked down at the gardening gloves in her hands. For a long time, I thought she was just overwhelmed. But over the past year, she became more isolated. Friends stopped visiting. She spent more time alone. Some days I would see her sitting in the garage for hours. My stomach tightened. Did she ever say why? Linda shook her head. Not directly. She paused. But she once asked me whether I thought people could lose contact with loved ones without realizing someone was standing in the middle. I stared at her. The words sounded strange, almost cryptic, yet they connected perfectly to everything I had been discovering. Missing messages, missing calls, missing conversations. Linda looked toward Emily's house. She seemed frightened of something, she said quietly. Not frightened in the way people think. More like someone who no longer trusted what was real. I thanked her and began walking back toward the house. As I reached the driveway, I noticed something that made me stop cold. Through the living room window, Emily was standing alone, staring directly at the street. Not at me, at Linda's house. And when our eyes finally met through the glass, she slowly shook her head as if warning me about something I did not yet understand. The image of Emily standing behind the window stayed with me for the rest of the afternoon. She had not looked frightened. She had looked concerned. Concerned that I was asking questions. Concerned that I was getting too close to something she had spent months trying to keep hidden. When I stepped back into the house, she was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. The moment our eyes met, she gave me a small smile. "Did you enjoy your walk?" she asked. "I did," I replied. Neither of us mentioned Linda. Neither of us mentioned the strange warning hidden behind that smile through the glass. The silence between us felt deliberate. Later that evening, Ryan returned home carrying groceries. As usual, he seemed perfectly relaxed. He talked about work, traffic, weekend plans. The conversation flowed naturally. Yet once you begin noticing patterns, it becomes impossible to stop. Every time Emily started speaking, Ryan somehow redirected the discussion. Every time I asked a question that touched on family, communication, or friendships, another topic appeared almost immediately. The The changes were subtle enough that most people would never notice them. I noticed every one. After dinner, Emily went upstairs earlier than usual. Ryan settled into the living room to watch television. I remained at the kitchen table pretending to read the news on my phone. Around 9 o'clock, Ryan received a call and stepped outside onto the front porch. The moment the door closed behind him, I heard soft footsteps on the staircase. Emily appeared in the hallway. She looked toward the porch, then toward me. "Dad," she whispered. I immediately stood. "What is it?" For several seconds, she simply stared at me. Then she reached into the pocket of her sweater and removed a small folded piece of paper. "Do not open this until you are alone," she said. My pulse quickened. "Emily." She shook her head gently. "Please." Before I could ask another question, the front door opened. Ryan stepped back inside. Emily disappeared upstairs so quickly that the entire exchange felt unreal. I slipped the folded paper into my pocket and said nothing. Nearly an hour later, I finally found myself alone in the guest room. The house was quiet. My heart pounded as I unfolded the note. Written in Emily's handwriting were only 2 sentences. "If Megan contacts you, listen to her. There is something in Storage Unit 214. I read the note 3 times. Storage Unit 214. The number meant nothing to me. Yet the message confirmed something important. Emily wanted me to find something. More importantly, she trusted Megan. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The note remained on the nightstand beside me. I stared at it while the first light crept through the curtains. Around 7 o'clock, my phone vibrated unexpectedly. A text message appeared from an unknown number. At first I assumed it was spam. Then I opened it. The message contained only 8 words. "Dad, this is Megan. Do not call me." My heartbeat accelerated immediately. A second message arrived less than 10 seconds later. "I know about Storage Unit 214. A third followed. "If you want the truth, meet me today." I sat motionless on the edge of the bed staring at the screen. Outside the window, the neighborhood looked peaceful and ordinary. Inside the house, I could hear Ryan moving around downstairs. Yet suddenly everything felt different. Because for the first time since returning home, someone was no longer hinting at the truth. Someone was offering to show it to me. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. I kept replaying Megan's messages in my head while pretending everything was normal. Ryan sat across from me at breakfast discussing a project at work. Emily remained unusually quiet. Every few minutes, I caught her glancing in my direction. It was not the look of someone hiding a secret from me. It was the look of someone hoping I would find it. Around noon, another message arrived from Megan. The address was short and unfamiliar. It belonged to a storage facility on the north side of town. Beneath the address, she included only one sentence. "Go alone." I waited until Ryan left for an afternoon meeting before grabbing my keys. Emily was standing near the kitchen window when I headed toward the front door. For a moment, I considered telling her where I was going. Before I could speak, she gave a small nod. It was almost invisible, yet somehow it felt like permission. The drive took about 20 minutes. The storage facility sat behind a chain-link fence surrounded by warehouses and delivery yards. Nothing about it stood out. That was probably the point. People rarely pay attention to ordinary places. Megan was waiting near the entrance. I had not seen her in nearly a year. She looked tired, older than 30 years should allow. The moment she saw me, she wrapped her arms around me. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. "Dad," she whispered. "I am sorry." "For what?" I asked. She stepped back and shook her head. "For not finding a way to tell you sooner." She handed me a small key attached to a faded plastic tag. The number 214 was printed across the front. "Emily rented it almost 8 months ago," she explained. "She started collecting things after she realized nobody believed what she was saying." My stomach tightened. What exactly has she been collecting? Megan looked away. "Evidence." We walked together through rows of metal doors until we reached Unit 214. The afternoon heat pressed down from above as Megan unlocked the padlock. When the metal door rolled upward, I expected a few boxes. Maybe old paperwork. Instead, I froze. The entire unit had been organized like an archive. Plastic containers lined one wall. Filing boxes filled another. A folding table sat in the center beneath a battery-powered lamp. Everything had labels. Everything had dates. Everything had purpose. She did all of this herself? I asked quietly. Megan nodded. Every weekend. Sometimes late at night. I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was a thick binder resting on the table. A single word had been written across the front in black marker. Dad. My throat tightened immediately. I opened the cover. Inside sat a handwritten note. Dad, if you are reading this, then I finally found a way to reach you. Please do not make any decisions until you see everything. I stared at the page. It was unmistakably Emily's handwriting. Beneath the note sat dozens of printed records. Phone logs, screenshots, copies of emails, calendar entries, carefully organized timelines. The deeper I looked, the more disturbing the pattern became. Calls placed to my number that never appeared on my phone. Emails sent from Emily that never reached my inbox. Messages that vanished completely. For nearly a year, my daughter had been trying to contact me, and somehow those attempts kept disappearing. I slowly turned another page. Attached beneath a clear plastic sleeve was a photograph. It showed a computer screen displaying a long list of deleted messages. At the bottom of the photograph, Emily had written 7 words in red ink. This is where everything started to change. I remained inside storage unit 214 long after Megan left. The photograph attached beneath the plastic sleeve sat on the table in front of me while dozens of questions raced through my mind. Emily had not been imagining things. She had been documenting them. Every page revealed another missing message, another interrupted conversation, another connection that somehow disappeared before reaching the people who needed it. I turned the next page carefully. What I found was not a dramatic confession or a shocking revelation. It was something much more convincing. A timeline. Emily had spent months recording dates, times, and outcomes. On one side, she listed every attempt she made to contact me while I was in Britain. On the other side, she recorded what actually happened afterward. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Messages vanished. Calls failed. Emails never arrived. Family plans fell apart because key information never reached the right people. I sat down and continued reading. The deeper I went, the more organized everything became. Emily had created color-coded folders. Blue tabs contained communication records. Green tabs contained financial documents. Yellow tabs contained personal notes. She had approached the entire situation like a teacher building a lesson plan. Every claim was supported by evidence. Every conclusion pointed back to facts. Then I discovered a small notebook tucked inside the back cover of the binder. Unlike the other documents, this one contained personal observations. The first entry immediately caught my attention. It described a dinner from nearly 10 months earlier. Emily had arranged a family video call with me and Megan. According to her notes, everyone confirmed the time. Yet hours before the call, she received a message claiming Megan had canceled. Later, she learned Megan never sent that message. Similar incidents appeared again and again. Different dates, different circumstances, same outcome. Family members slowly drifted apart because information was being altered somewhere along the way. My pulse quickened as I continued reading. Near the middle of the notebook, Emily described the moment she realized the problem might not be accidental. She wrote that she began comparing screenshots with Megan. Certain messages looked different on each phone. Some contained information the other person never received. Others disappeared entirely after being viewed. She did not know how it was happening. She only knew it was happening. I closed the notebook and stared across the storage unit. For the first time since returning home, I understood why Emily looked so exhausted. Imagine spending months trying to prove something nobody else could see. Imagine watching relationships crumble while knowing the truth remained hidden somewhere beneath the surface. My eyes drifted toward another box resting beside the table. Unlike the others, it carried no label. Inside, I found a collection of flash drives, folders, and printed reports. One folder immediately stood out. Across the front, Emily had written 3 words in red marker. Start here last. My heartbeat accelerated. Whatever was inside had been important enough for her to separate from everything else. I opened the folder carefully. The first page contained a simple handwritten note. Dad, if you have reached this folder, then you already know I was telling the truth. The second page contained a list of names. Mine, Megan's, several family friends, former co-workers, even Linda from across the street. Every person on the list had one thing in common. At some point during the past year, communication between them and Emily had mysteriously broken down. I stared at the page for several seconds. Then I noticed another sealed envelope attached to the back. Written across the front in Emily's handwriting were 8 words that made my stomach tighten immediately. This is the person you never suspected. For several seconds, I stared at the sealed envelope without moving. The words written across the front seemed impossible. This is the person you never suspected. Throughout the entire investigation, my attention had been focused on the same questions. Who was benefiting from the confusion? Who was standing between Emily and the people trying to help her? Who had the opportunity to influence so many conversations without attracting attention? Slowly, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded twice. I unfolded it carefully and immediately recognized Emily's handwriting. Dad, if you are reading this, please remember something important. Not everyone who causes harm intends to. Sometimes people convince themselves they are helping. I read the sentence again. Then again. It was not what I expected. I continued reading. Emily explained that months earlier she had begun tracing the source of several missing messages. At first, she believed someone was deliberately intercepting communications. Later, she discovered something far more complicated. Certain accounts, devices, passwords, and shared settings had been accessed by more than one person over time. Some changes appeared intentional. Others appeared careless. The result was the same. Information stopped reaching the people who needed it. I turned the page. Attached beneath the letter were printed screenshots showing account recovery requests, forwarding settings, and notification changes. Technical details filled the margins. Emily had spent months documenting every discovery. Then I reached the final paragraph. That was when I saw the name. Ryan. My chest tightened immediately. Not because I was surprised to see him mentioned, because of what came next. Emily did not accuse him of orchestrating everything. Instead, she documented how his attempts to manage her communications gradually expanded over time. At first, he claimed he was helping organize accounts. Then he offered to simplify passwords. Later, he began handling technical problems whenever devices malfunctioned. Each step appeared harmless by itself. Together, they created a situation where too much control rested in one person's hands. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the wall. The answer was not dramatic. It was worse. It was believable. People rarely notice control when it arrives one small step at a time. By the time they recognize it, the pattern already feels normal. I spent another hour reviewing the documents before finally leaving the storage unit. The sun was beginning to set as I drove home. Orange lights stretched across the Texas sky. For the first time since arriving, the pieces were starting to fit together. Not perfectly, but enough. When I pulled into the driveway, Ryan's truck was already there. Through the front window, I could see him setting the dinner table. Emily stood nearby. The scene looked peaceful, ordinary. Yet I now understood how easily appearances could hide deeper problems. During dinner, I said very little. Instead, I observed. Ryan spoke confidently about future plans. Emily listened quietly. Several times I noticed her studying my expression as though searching for a sign. I gave her none. Not yet. Later that evening, after Ryan went upstairs to take a work call, I found Emily alone in the kitchen. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached into my pocket and placed the folded note from storage unit 214 on the table between us. Her eyes widened immediately. She recognized it. Slowly, she looked up at me. I did not ask questions. I did not demand explanations. I simply said 4 words. I believe you now. The relief that crossed her face lasted only a second before tears filled her eyes. Then she whispered something I will never forget. Dad, there is still one thing you do not know. For a moment, I could not speak. Emily's words hung between us in the quiet kitchen. There is still one thing you do not know. I pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. The house was silent except for the faint sound of Ryan moving somewhere upstairs. Emily wrapped both hands around a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. She stared at it for several seconds before finally speaking. The messages were only part of it, she said softly. The missing calls, the emails, the confusion, all of that mattered. But it was never the real reason I started collecting evidence. My heart sank. Then what was? She took a deep breath. Because I stopped trusting my own memory. I listened without interrupting. Over the next hour, Emily told me everything she had been unable to say for nearly a year. She described how constant confusion slowly made her question herself. When plans changed unexpectedly, she blamed herself. When people claimed conversations never happened, she blamed herself. When family members stopped responding, she blamed herself. Little by little, her confidence disappeared. That was when she started keeping records. Not to expose anyone. To protect her own sense of reality. The storage unit had become her safeguard. her proof that events were happening exactly as she remembered them. By the time she finished talking, tears filled her eyes. "I thought everyone would think I was imagining things," she whispered. "Including you." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Never again," I said. The following weeks changed everything. Megan helped organize the records. Trusted professionals reviewed the documentation. Technical specialists examined account settings, message forwarding systems, and communication logs. Slowly, the picture became clearer. Many of the problems traced back to years of unnecessary control over shared accounts and digital access. Some actions appeared careless. Others crossed boundaries that never should have been crossed. Most importantly, the evidence confirmed one thing beyond question. Emily had been telling the truth from the beginning. Once the facts were established, relationships started healing. Friends who believed she had ignored them discovered she had been reaching out all along. Family members compared records and uncovered misunderstandings that stretched back months. Conversations that once felt impossible suddenly became honest. As the truth emerged, Ryan found himself unable to explain many of the decisions he had made regarding shared accounts, passwords, and communications. Eventually, he moved out of the house. There were no dramatic confrontations, no shouting matches, just the quiet consequence of facts replacing assumptions. Several months later, Emily purchased a small home closer to the elementary school where she taught. The place was modest but bright, with large windows overlooking a row of oak trees. On moving day, Megan and I helped carry boxes from sunrise until late afternoon. For the first time in a very long while, Emily laughed freely. Not the careful smile I had seen in photographs. Not the guarded expression from the garage. Real laughter. The kind I remembered from years earlier. As the sun began to set, we sat together on the front porch drinking lemonade. Emily looked out across the neighborhood and smiled. "I finally feel peaceful," she said. I looked at my daughter and realized how much strength it had taken for her to endure everything she had endured. Then I thought about the garage, the storage unit, the journals, the missing messages, and every clue that had led us here. In the end, the greatest payback was not revenge. It was truth. Truth gave my daughter her voice back. Truth gave her confidence back. Truth gave our family a second chance. And as I watched her unlock the front door of her new home that evening, I knew I had not returned from Britain early by accident. I had come home exactly when my daughter needed me most.